I'm gonna cheat and read mine because only Ham can manage to memorize it, and Fonta too. All right, so my task this evening is to tell you about mite testing, how to do it, and why. It's a basic beekeeping chore that we all hate, and if you haven't done it yet, you'll hate it too. But let's talk about why it's an important tool, especially during this season as we move into fall. Oh, that's so tiny. But there's a little tiny hive, almost dead. You're gonna have to trust me on this. There are many reasons why a honeybee colony can dwindle and die during the fall and winter season. We often attribute a dead out to things like starvation, a weak or small population, brood diseases, or just the cold and wet winter. And while it's true that those things do kill hives, it's much more common for the hive to have died from an uncontrolled Varroa mite population that manifests to look like those conditions. So let's look at a worst case scenario. So imagine that you have a strong, robust hive right now. You've taken the excess honey off, and the colony is beginning their natural seasonal decline in population. As we were reminded in Ham's talk, while the honeybee population slows its growth, the mite population is still ramping up. Left uninterrupted, the mites will predate both the adult bees and the pupating ones, while they multiply within the cocoons, thus weakening several generations of bees at the same time and spreading a variety of frightening diseases that further weaken the colony. A weak or sick population will affect every function of the hive. Foragers can't perform their jobs efficiently, so less food could be coming into the hive. Weakened guard bees may do the same thing at the very time when they're most needed to defend against things like yellow jackets and stronger hives. Nurse bees infected with viruses spread by mites will, in turn, spread them to larvae or may be unable to fill their jobs of properly feeding the next generation. If the situation becomes bad enough, the colony may even abandon their hive in the hope of finding another one where they might not have those problems. This is why we see late season swarming. In this case, the bees have almost always absconded, not swarmed, and that's a certain death sentence. This is a full dead out. We are infrequent visitors to the hives, so the effects of this slow collapse may look confusing or can be drawn out through the next few months or even years. The result can look like a poor brood pattern from some of the brood being neglected. We could easily blame that on a poorly mated queen, which can also present the same way. Or it could look like the colony became too small to stay warm during the winter, or couldn't move the cluster to where there was honey stored in the hive and were forced to starve, like this one. Maybe on the first warm day, as the oldest foragers flew out of the hive, they were too weak to return home, leaving such a small population that the remaining bees either froze or starved. If they make it to spring and the mite numbers drop back down from lack of brood to reproduce in, the colony may still fail to thrive due to diseases or because of their previously weakened state. So although we may not be seeing the tiny culprits, we could be seeing their long-term effects much later. Remember, there will always be some mites present in the hive, but when we interrupt the mites' population growth and keep their numbers in check, the healthy bees can continue to outnumber the weak or sick ones, as they do during the spring and early summer. So we've seen the list of brood diseases that mites can spread through the hive, and we've seen some mite images, but what are some simple indications that we have a mite problem that we can see before we run an actual test? You might check your bottom board. Some people use a sticky bottom board so that any fallen mites will remain on that board for you to see. This is not a mite control method. It is simply an indication that mites are present within your hive. Varroa mites have a natural lifespan and will drop off bees at the end of their life cycle, so there will always be some dead mites occasionally falling onto the bottom board. This can be more interesting to see when you're using a mite treatment and can actually see it in action. Another place you're going to see mites in the hive is on the drone brood. You can tear open capped drone brood to pull out the larvae and check for mites on their bodies. Drone pupa are their preferred place to reproduce, and drone brood is expendable this time of year, so it's a good place to check for mites and get an idea of your mite load. There are lots of viruses that are spread by mites, but most of them are difficult to differentiate at a glance. The one that's not is deformed wing virus. It begins to be present far more frequently in the hive as mite populations grow, and it's easy to spot. The affected bees will have twisted wings or be missing them entirely. If there are a large number of twisted wing bees present in a colony, it's a good indication that they might have a bad infestation. A spotty brood pattern or seeing bees pulling pupa out of the hive are also clear indications that the hive could be in trouble. You might never see a Varroa mite in your hive, but it doesn't mean that they aren't there. 80 to 90% of the mites in the hive are under cappings. Only 10 to 20% are on the adult bees, and of those, 99% are lodged on the underside of the abdomen of the bees, where you're unlikely to see them. Only 1% are hanging out on top of the bees, where you have a chance to spot them. If you are seeing Varroa mites on the backs of bees, you can be sure that there are far more on the bellies and beneath the cappings where you can't see. Why should we test? But back to the reason why we test for mites. We know that they're present, but it's still good to know how dire the situation is. Bees do drift and rob from other hives, so in areas with higher bee density, your mite counts may be much higher than those in more remote areas. We've certainly found this to be true in our different apiary locations. However, the most important reason why we test for mites is to check the efficacy of the mite treatments that we use. Some treatments come with very specific instructions and will not work if they haven't been timed properly. Others may simply not work at all. Testing both before and after a mite treatment will let you know whether you need to use an additional treatment afterwards. So performing a whitewash isn't fun. It's stressful for us and the bees and may make you feel like a murderer. The most effective mite wash will kill approximately 300 bees, but it will happen quickly and can help save your entire colony. Those same bees would gladly sacrifice themselves to sting an intruder if it would mean saving their whole colony. In a strong colony of honeybees, around 1,000 die from attrition each day. That's mostly foragers who die from old age in the field. And if your hive can't spare a loss of 300 bees during this time of year, it almost certainly has other problems that also need to be addressed. If you have so many hives that mite washing each hive, both before and after a treatment, seems overwhelming, I get it, it is. It's easy to prescribe this to someone with under 10 hives. But if you have 20 or 600, it could be out of the question. Consider taking a sampling from a couple hives per location. It's not exact, but could give you some idea of where your mite numbers stand in each area and whether a treatment that you used was effective enough. So how do we test? We use an alcohol wash or soapy water wash as the most accurate method of measuring your mite count. We use the Easy Check test kit. It's pretty easy to find from Man Lake or off Amazon. And there's others available, but the main instructions are basically the same. You'll also need rubbing alcohol, a half-cup measure, and a larger bucket or container. Carefully pick the frame of bees that you would like to test. The population of bees that you're looking for are the nurse bees. Mites tend to hang out on them more, and you'll find the nurse bees on frames with open brood in its larval stage, where the nurse bees are tending to them. Double and triple check the entire frame for your queen. It's best if you've already seen her in the hive and sequestered her into another area, but just make absolutely sure she's not going to end up in your sample bucket. Prepare by pouring about 2 cups of the alcohol into the testing vessel and setting it somewhere nearby that's sturdy. I like to set the empty bucket on top of the frames of the open hive, then shake the entire frame that you've chosen into the bucket. The older bees will fly off, leaving the younger nurse bees behind as you grab your half-cup measure. The remaining bees in the bucket can be gently swirled around, allowing you to scoop the half-cup that you need into the test vessel. Make sure that the entire half-cup makes contact with the alcohol as quickly as possible so as not to prolong the experience. and return any extra bees from the bucket into your hive. Close it up, then return to your sample jar and shake for about a minute. The mites will lose their grip as they die and sift through the screen so you can count them by looking up through the bottom of the jar. So we're going to watch this quick video. I'm hoping that we can see it. So we've got alcohol, the half-cup measure, a bigger bucket, and that little test vessel. But this is not playing. Nope. Maybe?
You have to go on the computer.
Oh. Okay. Oh well. Yeah. I'd like to at least make a stab. It might not be doing it. Okay, so we're gonna skip the video. But as described, you get the mites in there, or the bees, hopefully with mites. It's terrible. You shake them around, and then you look up through the bottom of the container and count your mites. So some people prefer a sugar roll method instead of the alcohol wash for mite testing in the hope that it won't kill those 300 bees. However, that method is not as accurate or as humane as you would want. The powdered sugar used in the sugar roll is supposed to induce grooming in the bees, but as we just learned from the mite biology portion, the bees can't easily just kick the mites off of their body. The other theory is that the sugar stops their feet from gripping onto the bees, and maybe it does, but they are unharmed, so they can jump right back on. In the hope of dislodging the mites, you're supposed to shake the jar of bees and sugar for so long and for so hard that the bees can suffer internal damage that shortens their life cycle later. Powdered sugar also contains cornstarch that the bees shouldn't ingest and can clog their spiracles. If the mites don't dislodge, your results will be inaccurate, making the whole process pointless, or it could give you such a low test result that you decide that you don't have mites at all. It should also go without saying that putting powdered sugar into your hive is not a mite treatment. Just off the table. The downside of any mite test is that you could still get an inaccurate sample group, even if you're doing everything correctly. That's why testing more than one hive, if you have several, is important in order to get an average. If you have 3 hives next to each other, the first one shows 10 mites in its test, you find 0 in the next hive and 25 in the third, you know that the one with 0 was probably an inaccurate sampling, even if it might be doing better than the other 2. All 3 should still be treated with the same method, the same timing, and then tested again afterwards. So for the confusing bit, so now you've tested 1/2 cup or approximately 300 bees from your hive. Say you got a result of 15 mites. You'll now divide that number by 300, then multiply it by 100 for the percentage of mites in that hive. In that example, it adds up to a 5% mite infestation. To simplify the math, you're really just trying to find the number of mites per 100 bees. So if you've sampled 300 bees, just divide the result by 3. A healthy hive should be around 1% or 2%, so 5% is well into the danger zone. That is unreadable. The threshold for treatment is most commonly at 3%. That would be a finding of 3 mites. That's the level that you want to be at when your fall treatments are complete. If your post-treatment test gives you a higher result, you'll want to treat the hive again. So, before I step down, I want to add one more thought. Controlling for mites is the most difficult thing that we do as beekeepers, and it's also one of the very most important. Mistakes made at this time of year can mean life or death for your hive, and it's hard not to take it to heart when you lose a hive or several. Remember that beekeeping is a project that requires you to continue to learn, observe, and adjust in order to help your hives be successful. Failures happen, so take the time to learn from them. Every mistake that you make or weird new situation that you come across is an opportunity to learn and become a better caretaker for your future bees. And that is all I have on testing. Does anyone have questions?